Hi guys, it's Sophie from Most Magical Guides here, and today I'm going to be talking about the good, the bad and the ugly at Disneyland Paris. So in November 2021, I finally got to go back to Disney and I went to Disneyland Paris for 5 days. I had the most incredible trip. But today I'm going to be breaking down the good points, the bad points and the really not so good points about Disneyland Paris so that you can be fully prepared for your own trip when you go to Disneyland Paris. So let's start with the good points first. Always start with the good first. So what I have to say is that some of the best versions of Disney rides can be found at Disneyland Paris, like Space Mountain, Pirates of the Caribbean, Tower of Terror. All of these rides I think are my personal favourites. What I really like about Disney is that they have a lot of similar attractions in their various theme parks, but they're different enough that it's worth going to visit all of the parks to experience them. But I really do think Disneyland Paris has some of the best versions out of anywhere in the world. There's just something extra about them. I don't know if it's because I grew up going to Disneyland Paris and that was my kind of local park, but I just think, especially stuff like Space Mountain where you've got the launch, it's so unlike any other Space Mountain. It's just so iconic. The storyline in Tower of Terror and the drop sequences are different to what you'll get in, say, Hollywood Studios. And I just really enjoy the way they've done it. So I really think that that is something that I enjoy the most about going to Disneyland Paris, is that the rides there are incredible and some of the best versions you will find out of any Disney park anywhere. Something else that I really enjoyed whilst I was there is that it is just such a beautiful park. Disneyland Park itself is so stunning, and they'd recently renovated the castle. It was looking bright and fresh and really beautiful. And I know Disney cannot control the sun. That is not something Disney can do, but the lighting is so beautiful, particularly first thing in the morning and at golden hour as the sun's setting, and you get the most incredible photographs just because the lighting, particularly on the castle and in Frontierland, was so good. So I really enjoyed that because you just had stunning photos. Also, everything looked super fresh and bright and beautiful, and I don't know if from my last trip Disney had done a lot of renovations or not, but just the park looked really good. Everything was really well manicured and maintained. Like I say, everything was bright and fresh, and I really liked that about this park. And it's also said that many people believe that Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland Paris is the most beautiful Disney castle in the world. And I am definitely in that camp. I've always believed that. It really looks like the iconic kind of Disney castle that you imagine in your head. When you see it, you're like, oh my God, that's the one. And it's just very beautiful, the way they've designed it, the colours. I know that something Disney do is they do look at the light and weather conditions in the countries and the areas that they are building their castles so they can match the colours to look good in that specific light. And there's just something really stunning about Sleeping Beauty Castle. One of my favourite parts of my trip was using extra magic hours. So because I was staying at one of the Disneyland Paris hotels, I got to go into the parks 1 hour early each day, and you got so much done. On my last day, I managed to get, it was 4 or 5 rides in that first hour, and it was more than I got in for the rest of the day. So it really does give you a head start. And it's also stuff like Tower of Terror, whilst I was there, was getting kind of 40-minute to an hour-long queues, whereas Extra Magic Hours I walked straight on. So you really can save so much time and get so much done in that first hour. So it's definitely worth utilising if you are staying at a Disneyland Paris hotel. Disneyland Paris is also great for its small size. So because it's small in size, you can walk around super easy. You're not getting overly tired. Your feet aren't like dying. Your back's not cramping up. You're getting just to experience the parks and enjoy them without having to worry about the Disney hangover, as it's known. So sometimes I would be walking from Tomorrowland to Frontierland, which are on opposite sides of the park, and it was maybe a 5-minute walk, so it's really nice and comfortable. I also really enjoy that Disneyland Park and Walt Disney Studios Park are next door to each other. In front of them is Disney Village, and then off to the side of Disney Village is the Disney hotels. All of the hotels are within a maximum of a 20-minute walk to the parks. They also have free shuttles, but because everything is so close together, it's so easy to get around. You definitely can't get lost, and it's really nice if you want to park hop. Super easy, like a 5-minute walk between the parks. If you want to go to Disney Village for lunch, no worries, it's only going to take you a few minutes to get there. If you want to go to the Disney Village after the parks to have your dinner, and then you can carry on walking to your hotel, it's super convenient. So I think that's one of the massive benefits to Disneyland Paris is you cannot get lost, everything is really close together, and everything's kind of a maximum of a 20-minute walk. Something I really enjoyed and was grateful for was that Disney are really taking your health and safety into consideration. So everywhere you go, there's hand sanitisation stations. They have hand sanitizer on the tables in the restaurants. They have little signs to remind you to keep your mask up. And I really, really enjoyed that because you do worry, should I be travelling during a pandemic, even though things are looking better? Is it the right thing to do? And I felt totally comfortable and safe there. And in fact, a lot of the measures you completely forget about. So the plexiglass dividers, you don't really notice. I'm someone that only wears masks for short periods of time because I work from home. So maybe like 4 hours maximum. So I was quite worried about wearing a mask for a long period of time, but you totally forget it was on. And I just really enjoyed that they were putting people's health and safety first, but actually it was not really noticeable. Like, yes, people were wearing masks, but because everyone's doing it, it just becomes completely normal. And everyone was complying, so you did feel really safe and really comfortable at Disney. So thanks, Disney. As we all know, the cast members are the heart and soul of Disney, and I had amazing experiences whilst I was there. Everyone was super friendly. This trip I went as a solo traveller and people went out of their way to make sure you were having a really great time and interact with you. I had so many fun interactions, and I think it's so nice that the cast members, you know, they do want to make everyone have a special experience. They go above and beyond whatever their job role is. If someone is a ride attendant or working in a restaurant, they don't just fulfil their duties, they go that extra step to make sure that you're having a fantastic time, and I super appreciated that. So thank you, cast members, because you literally are the people that make people's holidays so special. I really enjoyed using the Disneyland Paris app whilst I was in the park. It was super handy to see wait times, if rides were maybe temporarily shut down. You could find where certain restaurants were, where the shops were. If you needed the toilets, they would tell you where they are. Like, it was super handy. And I love that you can just, while you're waiting in the queue, pop out your phone, look at the app and see, oh, what's nearby, what are the wait times? I'll go there next. Could not have found it more convenient. So whenever you go on holiday, food is always a big part of your trip, and as a vegan I had heard horror stories about how Disneyland Paris is terrible for vegans, and although there aren't lots of choices available, all of the food I ate was so good. We know France is a country famous for cuisine and their love of food, and that comes across in what you eat at Disneyland Paris. It isn't just standard theme park fare. If you go to the table service restaurants, you get really incredible meals. I love that I got a lot of variety, but also that most of the meals were whole foods. There wasn't a lot of processed food, and you could really tell they'd thought about what they were making. And because they were using fresh ingredients, the food was delicious. So I have to say, even though there aren't lots of choices for vegans, everything I ate was superb. Something else that I was really pleased to find out was that Disneyland Paris is very plus size friendly. So again, going to theme parks, you do worry, are the harnesses going to fit? Will I be able to be on the rides? What will happen? And there was not one ride that I encountered any problems with whatsoever. When you're in Walt Disney World, they are much more accommodating to plus size people in the US when it comes to rides and harnesses and restraints, and in Europe it can be a bit more difficult, but in Disneyland Paris I was so pleased to find that everything was fine. In fact, the only times that I felt like, oh, this is a tighter fit was stuff like Philharmagique, which is just a show, but they have special seats because they have special effects that come out of the seats. So stuff like that was more where the issues could arise, but the rides themselves, I didn't have one issue on any ride. So I was super impressed with that. Something else I was super pleased with was my resort. I stayed at the Hotel Cheyenne and it was super peaceful, super relaxing. It was really amazing to just have that such calm energy when you're kind of in a big Disney theme park like experience. So it was really, really good. I loved the theming. It was so highly themed. It's different to Disney World in the sense of if you go to Disney World, the hotels are kind of themed more to Disney, whereas these hotels are themed highly, and then they'll have touches of Disney. So Hotel Cheyenne is Wild West themed. It was absolutely amazing. And then in the room you have some Toy Story decor, which really added to it. But I really enjoyed the hotel. It was super calm, super relaxing. It was one of the furthest hotels from the parks. But as I say, it's a maximum 20-minute walk. I got the shuttle on the days it was particularly cold, and I was so lucky. I don't know if I had like good luck, but there was always a shuttle waiting, and it takes less than 5 minutes to get to the park. So I could not big up this hotel more. It was absolutely amazing. So as a Brit, something I really enjoy about Disneyland Paris is how close it is to us. It's like a 40-minute flight from London to Paris, and then you can get a 10-minute train, or you can get the magical shuttle. So super convenient. And because Disneyland Paris is so much closer, it is more affordable than going to Disney World. Disneyland Paris can be expensive if you go at the very busy times of the year, but if you tend to go kind of the more winter or autumn, springtime months, and it's not school holidays, you can get really, really great deals. So when I went, I stayed for 4 nights, 5 days, and for my park tickets and my hotel, it cost £360, which is amazing. And that includes the fact that I was a solo traveller. So if I travelled with other people, that would have been even cheaper. So you can get fantastic deals. I was so impressed that I've actually gone and booked another trip. So that hopefully, fingers crossed, that will go ahead in the next couple of months. This trip is slightly more expensive, but that's partly because we are entering the 30th anniversary celebrations for Disneyland Paris, which I'm very excited to be experiencing. I think that's going to be absolutely awesome. But basically, if you shop around and check what dates you can do, you can get really, really good deals if you're travelling from the UK. So that is another big benefit to going to Disneyland Paris. Something that really made my trip special was the pure escapism. Obviously, we've all been in this pandemic for coming up to 2 years now, and this was my first trip abroad since the start of the pandemic, and I could not think of a better destination because at Disney, everything was happy, it was joyful. I completely escaped all of the worries of real life, of what was happening in the news. It was just pure joy every single day. And I think it was the perfect tonic. You came back feeling so much better, so much happier, and just every single day was just like heavenly being there. So I do not think there is a better place to visit than Disney for your first trip abroad, because it is just, it's got everything you could ever want, and just the atmosphere, how you're treated, all your experiences, you just cannot help but feel pure joy. So now we've heard all of the great things about Disneyland Paris, let's talk about the not so great things, the bad. So I have to say that even though they're coming under the bad label, there was nothing there that actually actively dampened my experience or would put me off going back to Disneyland Paris. So even though these are technically on the bad list, they're just things to be aware of when you visit. They're not something that are necessarily going to really take away from your experience. So one of the things to be aware of is if you are visiting on weekends, French national holidays or school holidays, the parks do get very busy. And because they aren't as big as, say, Walt Disney World, you definitely notice there being much more people there. So towards the end of my trip, there was a French national holiday, and the waiting times went from kind of like maximum 20 minutes for anything to 45 minutes, an hour for rides. So it really went up a lot overnight. And obviously that could kind of put a bit of a dampener on things if you're not expecting it and you're not prepared. And especially when the start of the week you're just kind of walking onto rides, and then it's a 30-minute wait to go on It's a Small World, and you're like, oh, can I really wait that long when I've just been walking on? So that's the only thing to be aware of. Before I go, I normally check for school holiday dates. I didn't actually realise there was a French national holiday whilst I was there. So that's just something to be aware of. Just check your dates before you go, and then you'll get a better idea of what the wait times will be. So as I said, I had some amazing food whilst I was at Disneyland Paris, but the only downside is I visited in November, so some of the restaurants were shut seasonally, and also whilst I was there, some restaurants would be unexpectedly shut. Like the week before they were on the app, they're going to be open. When I was there, no, they're closed the whole week. So you have to kind of have backup plans. So I'd already kind of researched all the places I could eat food. So I did know, okay, if that place is closed, I could go somewhere else. The downside is if you have a dietary requirement like me, being vegan, or if there's certain types of food you enjoy and others that you don't, so you've picked your restaurants based on that, it can be a bit more difficult to eat whilst you're there if for some reason the restaurants you want to eat in aren't open. So that's just something to be aware of. Just have a backup plan, have a list of a few different restaurants you can go to, and that will help you out massively whilst you're there. Something else to be aware of is the food can be a bit pricey. So being in a theme park, you kind of do expect that it will be a bit more than usual. Most of the table service restaurants offer 2 or 3 course set menus. 2 courses are normally around €30, 3 courses around €40. So bear that in mind if you're eating at table service restaurants. Quick service locations are kind of more around the €10 mark, so they are much more affordable. But it's good to have in mind a rough idea of how much things might cost. You can budget for it. One of the great things is that Disneyland Paris on their website has the menus for all of the restaurants, so you can see in advance how much things are going to cost you. Another thing that can quickly add up of cost is the merchandise. So I'm a big fan of merchandise, as we can see from all of the haul videos I'm constantly doing. But I just think it's so incredible everything you can get at Disney. So I had planned to not get too much this time because I didn't have much space in my cabin bag to get back to the UK. So in some ways that's a good thing because it does make you rein in the shopping, but it is good to be aware that the merchandise can be a bit pricey because it is Disney after all. But that being said, merchandise is typically cheaper than at Walt Disney World. So for example, ears in Disney World can be around $30. In Disneyland Paris, they were about €24, which is just over £20. So they are cheaper than in Disney World, but just be aware that if you want to go on a little shopping spree, save up some extra money. If you're anything like me, you'll need to be saving up in the months leading up to your trip just so you can have all of the things that you're going to see that you're going to want to buy. If you are flying into France, you can get to Disneyland Paris via the train or by the Magical Shuttle. This time I used the Magical Shuttle. It's the first time I've ever used it. I actually had a really good experience. The only downside I would say is that currently there are less Magical Shuttles running than usual. So there are fewer and they're more spaced out. That can be a downside if you land and then you just miss a bus because you could be waiting an hour to an hour and a half for the next one. And the same on your return. They say to get a Magical Shuttle about 3 hours before your flight, but the time of my flight I had to get a shuttle about 3.5 to 4 hours before just because there was an hour and a half gap between the times, so the next time would have been cutting it a bit too fine. The only other downside to the Magical Shuttle is that the flights coming from the UK tend to land in terminals A or B at Charles de Gaulle Airport, which is where I went. And the Magical Shuttle is actually right at the other end of the airport. And airports are big. Airports are really big. It is the main airport in France, so it makes sense it's big. But I managed to get there in 20 minutes, but it was like some Usain Bolt level activity to get there. It was absolutely insane. I was absolutely knackered by the time I got on the bus, but it was because I was like, if I miss that bus it's going to be an hour's wait and I don't really want to do that. So luckily, because I was one person on my own, I could hot foot it through the the airport, looking probably inelegant and a bit crazy, but that's fine. But if you are traveling with other people, if you have mobility issues or children, probably take it easy. Don't do the running. I think next time I'm not going to do the mad dash. If I miss it, I'm going to just get the next one. But that is something to keep in mind, that if you do get the Magical Shuttle, there could be these big gaps of waiting. The other option is the train. There is a high-speed train which takes 10 minutes to get to the gates of Disneyland Paris, which is fantastic. The downside to this is they also can have large gaps in between. So when I landed, there was a possibility of getting one train quite soon, or I would have to wait, I think it was like an hour and 45 minutes for the next one, which I wasn't keen on. So that is why I didn't get the train. The other downside to the train is the closer to your trip, the more expensive it gets. Typically it's about €15 each way. However, some of the times of the trains are more like 30 to €40 each way. So it can very quickly get expensive depending on which train you're forced to get. So that's another reason I didn't get the train. But I would say overall, my preferred method to get to Disneyland Paris is the Eurostar. However, the time of year I was going, they weren't running from Ashford, which is the nearest station for me to get to. So that is something to bear in mind. Also, certain times of the year, the Eurostar doesn't travel to Disneyland Paris because they do works on the lines. So that's something to take into account of how easy is it for you to get to Disneyland Paris using the Eurostar. So as we all know at the moment, face characters can't do meet and greets because obviously the safety aspect. So instead what they're doing is the Princess Promenade. I was a little bit disappointed with this, if I'm honest, just because I think I started queuing for it about 45 minutes before, thinking it was a bit more like a parade than it was. It's basically one float with some princesses on. It's super cute, but what I would say is just kind of rock up a few minutes before or try and catch it in a part of the park which is quieter. So if you go to the right side of the castle, which is the route leading to Fantasyland, like the back way to Fantasyland, it's so much more spacious there. You will be able to see it. I made the mistake of doing the classic, I'm gonna wait on Main Street. And I waited for 45 minutes and it was like flash and it was gone and I was freezing cold and I was like, oh, it was just one float. So what I would say is I wouldn't recommend actively seeking out a spot and standing there for ages. Just rock up before, go to a quiet part and you'll get a great view and you'll enjoy it. So as much as I found the app super helpful to use whilst I was there, there were some glitchy things that were a bit unhelpful. So for example, I had reservations at Manhattan Restaurant at the Art of Marvel Hotel, but whenever I looked in the app, it would tell me that that restaurant was fully closed. And I was like, is it closed? Is it not closed? They haven't told me my reservation's been cancelled. I would ask cast members and they would go, oh no, it's fine, it's fine. But I was like, yeah, but it's saying it's closed. Basically what they explained was that to stop people going to the restaurant hoping for walk-up reservations, they would just put on the app that the restaurant is closed. But obviously that is a bit confusing if you don't know that. So there were some glitchy things like that that were a bit unhelpful whilst I was there. So sometimes the Wi-Fi in the parks can be a bit patchy, but it would literally be a case of walking 100 yards and then the signal will be back to full. So it doesn't really impact your experience. If you're using Wi-Fi for the app, for example, you're going to be absolutely fine. There were times when I tried to use WhatsApp to call people back in the UK and I did find that wasn't very good. However, in my resort room, the Wi-Fi was perfect, so I could do all of my WhatsApp phone calls from there. But if you just want to send messages, check the app for the times, the Wi-Fi was absolutely fine. One of my biggest things that I enjoyed was extra magic hours, but the one thing I would say is that what rides are open is very sporadic. So it wasn't that, oh, these rides are all going to definitely be open. Some days you'd go and they would be open, some days they wouldn't. At first I thought, oh, is it just the Fantasyland rides that are open, because I was going to Big Thunder, Haunted Mansion, Pirates, and they were all shut. But then the next day I would go and Big Thunder would be open. So there's no continuity between which rides are going to be open during extra magic hours and not. But I would say the app was very helpful because it would tell you the wait time, so you knew which rides were open and where to head to. So if you are adults visiting Disneyland Paris, it's worth bearing in mind that once the park shut, there aren't lots of things to do. So you can go to Disney Village where there's restaurants, some of the shops will be open. There are a handful of bars. I would recommend going to the Art of Marvel Hotel and going to the Skyliner bar because it's such an amazing resort. You should definitely check it out. But there aren't lots of things to do. There is a cinema, but all of the films are shown in French. So unless you know French, you're not going to really be able to know what's going on. So it is difficult. Like for me, I was quite happy to go back to my resort and relax, watch some Netflix on my devices, so it was fine. But if you are looking for evening entertainment, you may struggle to find it a little bit. So speaking of the hotel rooms, they all come with TVs and they do have some English language channels, but mostly it's news and the Disney Channel. A lot of the Disney Channel programs were more for small children. So I do like watching Disney programs, but they didn't have stuff that were more kind of like family programs. It's more like aimed at little children. For me, I just used my devices and watched Netflix, but that is something to be aware of, that it's good to bring something with you, whether it be a device or books or something, so that if you are in your hotel room and you don't want to watch like Disney Junior or news channels, then you've got something to keep you entertained. Another thing about the hotel was that there are adjoining doors between rooms, which is perfect if you need that, but I did find that the noise did travel between the rooms. I don't think the people next to me were obnoxiously loud. I think it was just the fact that the adjoining door, the noise was travelling underneath it. So you will sometimes hear people. That being said, I didn't hear anyone above me walking around. I did visit in a quieter time of year, so perhaps that's why. And if you were visiting in the height of summer, maybe you would hear more noise. But for me, it was just sometimes late in the evening, I could hear the people next door kind of laughing, joking, having a good time, which you're in Disney, you're going to be doing that. So that's just something to be aware of, that you can hear a little bit of your neighbours in the Hotel Cheyenne at least. The only other downside I found with the hotel was that when you check in, they have some strange policy that you are not allowed to take your luggage up to the counter. I don't really know why, but they said to me, nope, you have to go and leave that with the people you're travelling with. And I said, oh, I'm here on my own. So I had to go and check my luggage into the luggage store, which is actually outside the building. I then had to come back, go through the whole checking your COVID pass and looking through your bags, then go to the counter that way, collect my key, then go back to the storage to get my luggage. So that was a little bit irritating because it's a bit of a faff. It didn't take very long. They were really quick at doing everything, but it was quite irritating to kind of have to go backwards and forwards, and there's no accommodation for if you're traveling on your own. So even though these things are on the bad list, none of them really had an impact on my trip, but it's good to know in advance for your own trip so that you can kind of navigate these and avoid them, some of the pitfalls that I found, if you've got the information in advance. So hopefully that will help you and you'll be able to have the most amazing trip without worrying about any of these things. So now let's talk about the ugly. So these are the things that could potentially have an impact on your enjoyment whilst visiting Disneyland Paris. So the first one, and this comes up a lot when people talk about Disneyland Paris, is smoking. So smoking is allowed in designated areas of the park, and they kind of do a good job at concealing them. Some of them aren't, so some of them will be right next to toilets, so you have to walk through all the smoke to get to the toilet. But the thing that's kind of the bugbear is that people don't tend to follow these rules. This was particularly bothersome when it was time for fireworks shows or parades because you can't really get away. You're just stuck next to all the smoke. So that is something that is problematic, and it does come up a lot with people visiting Disneyland Paris being unhappy with that. What I would say is that earlier this year, Disney have added more signage and are really pushing to let people know there are designated smoking areas, so please use them. So I would say it isn't something I saw all the time. It wasn't like I was wading through smoke everywhere I was going. It would be the occasional thing. And like I said, it was more when you were in parades or waiting for fireworks because you couldn't escape it. That I only saw like a handful of people across the time. I would say it was more bothersome when the smoking area was near like a bathroom and you'd have to walk through it to get there. But aside from that, I think, you know, Disney are doing their best to make sure that people who do smoke have places to go. As we know in Disney World, you have to actually leave the parks to smoke, which is more inconvenient. But Disneyland Paris do have these designated areas. So if you do smoke, just make sure that you pop in there, just for the benefit of everyone. So something else that comes up a lot, and this is something that I did feel and notice, is that Walt Disney Studios Park is kind of a bit of a disappointment. And I do think that's true. As I mentioned in my day 3 vlog, when it was my first day visiting Walt Disney World Park during this trip, it doesn't really feel like a Disney park. It feels more like a usual theme park. It's kind of a bit hodgepodge. You know, you've got like Cars next to Crush's Coaster next to Aladdin. It's not so themed. So if you go to Disneyland Park itself, obviously you have Fantasyland, Frontierland, they're highly themed, it's cohesive, it makes sense. Whereas everything's a bit more put together. Also, half of the park is currently shut for the new Avengers campus that's going to be coming this summer. And then we're also going to be having a Star Wars land, a Frozen land that will be coming later. So this park will have lots of expansion and will have lots more to see and do. But presently, it is a bit disappointing. And I think that's not just because of the lack of things to do there, but it is just this, it doesn't have that cohesion, it does not have that Disney feel. And I went there for half a day on my third day, and I was feeling a bit like deflated, like not super buzzing. And then I went back to Disneyland Park and instantly your spirits were lifted. It was unbelievable the difference. But this is also why I think Disney is a great place to visit as a tonic, because you just instantly, you feel yourself become happier. So I would say that is something to be aware of. Just have your expectations ready that the park is not the same as other parks. I think I described it in my vlog as like a knockoff version of Hollywood Studios. And that sounds pretty harsh, but it is kind of like if someone had to replicate Hollywood Studios on a budget, or like they bought it off of Wish, this is what you would get. So there are fun things to do there. Like the Paris area with the Ratatouille ride is great. Tower of Terror, one of the best versions of it in the world, like amazing. But just manage your expectations. And what I would do is, I wouldn't say it's a whole day park. So you could park hop over to Disneyland Park and you'll get the best of both worlds. Something else that can be a bit frustrating is the opening hours for restaurants. So as I said before, depending on when you visit, some of the restaurants might be closed seasonally, but something else that's difficult is a lot of the restaurants in the park shut quite early. So a lot of the restaurants aren't open the entire day whilst you're there. Some of them shut at like 4 PM, 5 PM. So it does limit your dinner choices a lot because you either have to eat very early or have like a main meal in the middle of the day. Of course you have Disney Village that you can go and eat in, but that depends if there's restaurants there that you want to go and dine in. So that is something to be aware of. I would say if you're going to Disneyland Paris, just have a look at their website. You can see all of the restaurants. You'll also be able to work out, if you use the calendar, it will tell you what restaurants are going to be closed during your trip so that you can plan accordingly. But also you can look up the opening hours, because there's nothing worse than wanting to dine somewhere and you go for dinner and it's closed. I did have one day where it was a bit of an issue because somewhere that I wanted to dine in Disney Village had removed their vegan option. So I was like, oh gosh, I need to find somewhere else to eat. And it was just gone 5 PM. So nearly all the restaurants in the parks were now shut. So I was limited to just what was in Disney Village itself. So that was a bit of an annoyance, honestly. So that is just something else to be aware of. And my only other bugbear was finding out stuff like park hours or booking dining reservations. So you're supposed to be able to book your dining reservations 60 days in advance of your trip. For my trip, it didn't actually open up at 60 days. It was like 2 weeks later. So you were checking every day like what's going to happen. You do want to book dining reservations if you can, because they do sell out super fast. So it was quite frustrating not knowing if or when you were going to get them. And just one day just opened up. And I've actually been booking my dining reservations for my upcoming trip, and I've had trouble again this time. Actually, the reservations were open earlier than 60 days, which is kind of good. But there was lots of problems with, it would keep coming up with error messages and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a bother. I managed to kind of find a way around it where I just signed out of my account that my booking was with, and I made an account with a different email address and I could book. There was some weird hiccup happening with the account. So I've managed a way around it, but it's all of these little niggly things that are quite irritating. And it was also stuff like the park hours. They didn't announce what the park hours were until 1 week before I went, which is very annoying because it's stuff like when you're booking your dining, I like to know what times the parks might shut or what time fireworks might be happening, so I can plan my dining around that accordingly. So having no idea what time the park was shutting was also difficult. But I have to say, all in all, I had the most incredible trip. Like, I enjoyed it so much that within a week of landing, I booked another trip. It's just the perfect place to go and visit. It really does feel magical. It definitely has that Disney spirit, Disney vibe. And I would say if you're going to book, then absolutely take the plunge and do it. You will not regret it. It is such a brilliant Disney park. So even though I've mentioned the bad and the ugly, overall they were not things that really took away from my experience, and I just had the best trip. So I'm gearing up for my next trip. I'm very excited. But if you would like to see what I did in Disneyland Paris, be sure to check out the link in the description below to my playlist. And if you enjoy finding out about Disneyland Paris, Walt Disney World, Universal Orlando, be sure to click the like and subscribe button so you can find out all of the content so I can help you plan your own most magical trip to these destinations. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Disneyland Paris, or if you're planning an upcoming trip, or if there's any topics you'd like me to cover in my videos about Disneyland Paris, Walt Disney World, vegan food, solo travel, Universal Orlando, anything. Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you have a most magical day. Bye bye.